Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palumba. Today we're going to be wrapping up our conversation on attitude and persuasion. And so in the last lecture, we talked about the elaboration likelihood model. We talked about the status quo effect. We talked about flat rate bias. We talked about all of these psychological principles that really help explain how consumers formulate attitudes and what those attitudes might do to them as they're making consumption decisions. So without further ado, let's get started. Fish bean model. So fish bine, fish bean, I've heard both. But what it deals with is this notion of how we create beliefs. We alluded to this earlier in our lecture, dealing with how we perceive an object and create beliefs. Object-attribute linkages occur all the time. We look at an object, we formulate an attitude, and then we make said evaluation. Let's keep going. But do attitudes predict behavior? I posited this in the beginning. We talked about this. The direction and strength of attitudes is important to understand first and foremost. It depends how strong the attitude is to begin with. We also may have normative influence, and so we may have external influences that are at stake here. And we also have subjective norm, what we believe to be normal, what we believe to be average, what we believe to be acceptable. And then we have the attitude toward the act of buying. And so all of these elements and steps are at play as a consumer makes a decision about playing a game or buying a game or purchasing a console. What is my current attitude and what is the context of my world around me as I'm making these decisions about myself? As I'm making these decisions about how to connect. So when we think about consumers buying, the purchase, some may say, is the beginning of the relationship. You can also make the argument the purchase might be the last step in the relationship. We may have to do quite a bit to get to the point in which a consumer purchases a video game or a video game console. Let's keep going. Marketers change attitude. Reciprocity. Reciprocity insinuates that there's a mutually beneficial arrangement, relationship between two parties. So there must be some sort of reciprocity from purchasing said game. I am buying Nintendo Switch because it will allow me to connect to other people. I'm buying Nintendo Switch because to get to the university that I work at, I take the subway, I take the bus, I take a train. Reciprocity means that the consumer is also getting something out of it. And in fact, the consumer may believe that he or she is getting something more out of it that's worth more than the dollar amount. This console's only $150. Honestly, that's not that bad. It's a steal. There's more equity behind the console than the cash that I have. If we also think about scarcity here, scarcity is another device for marketers to help change attitudes. We know that water is plentiful, at least for now. And so water, while valuable, may be more inclined to be taken for granted by many of us here in the United States. If I take water away, if I put limits on it, if I create droughts, water all of a sudden is valuable, probably more valuable than it was for many of us. Scarcity breeds and engenders equity behind a product or service. Breeds equity behind a product or service. We also have authority here. Authority figures are quite useful when we're trying to persuade people to make a purchase. When we think about video game mascots, might think about Mario, might think about Crash Bandicoot for PlayStation, might think about the two Japanese gentlemen who drove around in a bunch of Wii advertisements saying we would like to play. We might think about social media influencers or YouTube influencers or vloggers like Ninja, like PewDiePie, like Markiplier. all of these people embody some level of authority, that they are able to state something about this or that, or they're able to illustrate something about this or that. They're experts in this or that. I can go read up on the console, or I can go listen to an expert. Knowledge acquisition is important for consumers, but many marketing studies have illustrated time and time again, we are very comfortable making decisions with the least amount of knowledge possible. We find that to be a method of expediency. We find that to be a method of assuredness. And so if we're thinking about authority figures save us time. They help prevent risk to the consumer. So authority is very, very powerful here as a tool to persuade people. We also have consistency. Well, I've grown up with Nintendo, I've grown up with Microsoft, I've grown up playing Call of Duty. The consistency principle, yet again, is here. Everything looks good, everything feels good, everything's consistent. And I like it, which goes for liking. And then finally, we have consensus. Marketers are able to tap into consensus by allowing people to rate video games, by allowing people to post about video games, by allowing people to share about using and playing video games. Sharing video game clips and sharing video gameplay clips, recorded clips, are very, very useful and powerful tools, particularly when we're thinking about how to persuade other people to get engaged and to get interested and to get motivated. And so from looking at all of these tools, marketers are able to change attitudes in a plethora of different ways here. Let's keep going. Information search. I alluded to this earlier. Consumers like to find information to help diminish uncertainty in their surroundings. How integral the product category is to themselves, and how averse they are to risk are different elements that are necessary to consider. These elements will inform how the consumer may go about gaining knowledge and information. Consumers don't like uncertainty, but they may delay obtaining information if they think the information will interfere with future pleasure or plans. So information must be desirable. Information must be useful. Otherwise, we may abstain from accepting information. We may delay obtaining information if we think the information is going to interfere in our lives. It's not useful. Let's keep going. Evaluating alternatives and product choices. So the consumer may come across a particular video game set, if you will. Every possible option may lie in the evaluation set. I have all of these video games to evaluate. From there, I might have a consideration set, a set of games that I might think about. So, for instance, I might go in my living room, making my own choices about whether or not to play a certain video game. And I may say to myself, well, out of this entire population of video games, which is my evaluation set, I might have a consideration set. Is it Assassin's Creed or Uncharted? Is it Fortnite or League of Legends? And so this is all dependent upon knowledge structures that I have previously, experiences that I've had previously, and as well as category exemplars. What I mean by category exemplars kind of connects back to a previous conversation we had about genres and managing expectations. Categories are meant to manage expectations for consumers. Positioning a product may include extending the uses of a product, the location in a store relative to other products. If we think about video game consoles, the location of where video game consoles are has changed. Video game consoles initially were in what aisle? Back in the 80s and 70s. They were in the toy aisle. Now, back in the 70s, the toy aisle was unisex. And so it had girl toys and boy toys in the aisle. In the 80s, we go back to kind of binary aisle divisions for toys. There's a boys section and a girls section. What happened with video game consoles? Well, they went to the boys section. And this propelled and propagated the myth that video games were only for men. And so where a product is in a store speaks volumes about how consumers should perceive that product. Today, video game consoles are either in the video game section, they have their own section, or they're in the electronics section, which again is more of a unisex section. How might this impact where video game consoles should be sold in a retail store? It depends who you're going after. If we think about the video game consumer, and if we think about the video game player, they might be different consumers. The video game consumer may play video games, but he or she may also be looking for a smart TV or be looking for an all-in-one option, perhaps. And so the Xbox One might do quite well actually being sold next to smart TVs and other living room technology. Differently, you could make the argument that because Sony has pushed for video gamers as being the primary linchpin of any device, that it really is all about the gaming experience. Yes, you can watch TV. Yes, you can watch Grey's Anatomy. Yes, you can watch Get Out. The gaming experience is by far and away more crucial to the overall product experience. If that's the case, it may behoove PlayStation to stick in the video game aisle. So again, we're able to manipulate and change consumer attitudes based around where we put products, how we feature products, how we leverage product equity. Let's keep going. Post-purchase evaluation. We're not done, ladies and gentlemen, when we make a purchase. We also have to think about next steps. What do we think? Do we return this? First, we have priming. How people were meant to perceive something. I might prime you and tell you, oh, Nintendo, Wii U, or the Switch is great for travel. I may use heuristics and cues to help educate you regarding how to use said product. Your expectations of what they should be may be covered in an advertisement or a commercial, showing you how the product functions, how the product may be used. Additionally, certain products may be indicative of certain cultures. Ethnocentrism. We know that in the video game console marketplace, we have two prominent Japanese companies, Sony and Nintendo, and then we have an American company, Microsoft. And so these consoles may be designed with cultural influences. For instance, Sony's PlayStation rarely has a bug defect. This has been written about. Japanese culture, business culture, states that you need to put out a product only when it is finished and of the utmost quality. Whereas with Microsoft, an American company, and American companies do this all the time, they desperately want to be first to market. That tends to be a business strategy. What does that mean? It means that the console may be defective. It may have bugs. There may be issues. It may have certain problems. Xbox was famous for having the red ring of death, in which a video game could be played but then destroyed while being played in the console. And so ethnocentrism and country of origin are very important elements here. Ethnocentrism also gets into whether or not our country is better than others. And so for some it may very well be that Microsoft, being an American company, is by far superior to Nintendo and to Sony. You could make that argument. You could also make that argument as a Japanese citizen that Nintendo and Sony are by far and away more advanced than Microsoft. Finally, price. We don't forget about price after we've purchased something as consumers. We use it as a metric, a benchmark, to evaluate product performance, to evaluate service performance. So these elements may impact how we purchase certain video game consoles now and in the future. You know, I spent $400 on the Xbox 360. It was terrible. I waited for the Xbox One to get down to $250 before I even conceived of making a purchase here. Video game console industry is kind of funny in this regard because typically video game consoles lose money. This has changed in recent years, but traditionally video game consoles are sold at a loss. The video game industry traditionally has adopted the razor blade model. The razor blade model states that you can sell a razor at a loss and you make up the money in blades. Now, in the video game industry, the blades are the video games themselves. So I may take a $20 loss, a $30 loss, a $40 loss, even a $100 loss on a console. Quite honestly, it doesn't matter if the average consumer is going to wind up buying 4 to 6 games. 4 to 6 games priced at $60 is $240 to $360. Accounting for everything else, the platforms, the Microsofts, Nintendos, and Sonys, they get a chunk of $20 or $15. They may be able to break even or to even make a little bit more money. Let's keep going. Source credibility in studies. So in thinking about source credibility from our previous lecture, we might discount material from untrustworthy sources. So if we're making these purchases, we might be skeptical in making a purchase from Valve, which is a smaller video game company. Be it games, be it consoles. Steam, we might be less inclined to trust with source credibility at stake. Viewers distinguish between credibility of official and citizen sources, but there was no difference among races. So we differentiate credibility from official sources, what Nintendo might say about its console, as well as what other people are saying, regardless of race. We're more interested in level and the source itself from where credibility or positive credibility is coming from. Consumers who receive a positively framed message rated product attributes greater than those who received a negatively framed message. And so if we're receiving positive messages in our advertisements rather than negative advertisements, rather than putting down other competitors, and instead if we're focused on ourselves as video game advertisers or as representatives of a video game, of a console, we might feel better. We might feel better there. Let's keep going. Source attractiveness. Now, aside from these guys being probably two good-looking guys, what I mean by source attractiveness here is how attractive are these sources when we're thinking about credibility, when we're thinking about gaining information, when we're thinking about learning something. So here we have Markiplier up top, followed by PewDiePie down below. And so when we think about these celebrities and we think about endorsers, these gentlemen really do serve as representatives of gaming experiences. You can trust them. They're funny. They're accessible. They're like you and I. They started out playing video games, and quite honestly, there was no difference between who they were then and who they are now. But we know that these gentlemen are invaluable to game designers. These gentlemen are able to show, quite honestly, gaming experiences and what they're like, helping to reduce risk for a lot of people. And additionally, these people, seemingly, as their videos are recorded, are just people playing video games. There is no insidious or ugly or manipulative advertisement going on. It's more of an honest admission of what the game experience is like. And we're able to get a sense to ourselves of whether or not we want to be exposed to these particular kinds of video game playing experiences. And so these two gentlemen really serve as another benchmark in gaining a sense of what is going on. Let's keep going. Twitch. Twitch is another way in which marketers are able to manipulate attitudes of consumers and persuade consumers to play certain video games. Twitch allows video game players to host live video streams. And so it's served for two services. We have for education and for entertainment as well. And so we have subscriptions to a particular streaming service every month. This is very popular for a lot of streamers. And so you're able to kind of follow along and see how somebody may play a video game. And it may serve in an entertainment capacity for someone. You may also be able to be educated. And being educated and being informed about a particular video game is just as insightful. So we have entertainment and we have information being dispensed here. $5 subscription to a particular streaming service every month. The most popular networks can earn $250,000 to $350,000. And so Twitch really has made video games way more accessible. It's served as an amazing and incredible platform, and it allows video game players to serve as opinion leaders, to serve as representatives for a game, and for them to also stamp their own logo or brand onto. Additionally, we have better credibility and better experts by those who are always playing video games, rather than having LeBron James or Kim Kardashian or somebody else playing these games. By having professional video game players or influencers coming on and playing these games, it allows for a much more honest and transparent mode of advertising. Let's keep going. Why are video game players passionate defenders? We deal with this all the time, don't we? We have one friend who passionately defends a video game. No, man. Fortnite is absolutely the best video game out there. There's no question about it. I don't want to hear about other video games, or Angry Birds is the best mobile app game out there. There's no disputing it. No. NBA 2K 2020 is the best video game, sports video game of all time, or the best basketball video game of all time. We have these conversations, don't we? We debate, we think, we put people down. We're interested in protecting games. But games don't protect us. So why do we do this? Consumers tend to believe that their choices are better than alternative options. By attacking a game, you're attacking somebody's decision. So choice supportive bias helps us selectively perceive an attribute more importance to information that supports the idea that we've made the appropriate choice. We've made the appropriate choice. We've made the appropriate choice. If anybody thinks differently, that means I'm wrong. It's not so much that we're worried about the video game reputation. We're also protecting our own decisions. Let's keep going. Creating our own identities. We create our own identities through gameplay. Another reason to protect ourselves. Social identity theory states that there are certain groups that we identify and support with. We believe that we're a part of these groups, and we self-categorize ourselves. Self-categorization theory also states that we're inclined to find our group. We perceive our world in categories. And so no, we don't have a membership card, but we believe we're part of those groups anyway. Possessions help define our own identity. We invest time and energy into particular video games. I am a marksman. I am Call of Duty. I am Halo. I am Grand Theft Auto. So if somebody's going to devalue a product or a service or something that we've aligned ourselves with, that's a personal attack as well. We respond poorly to that source of information. We don't like seeing both sides of things as people. Well-educated people tend to see both sides of things, but many people, even some well-educated, tend to just pick a side. We see this phenomenon all the time in politics. Are you Democrat or Republican? You're a moderate, means you're neither, and it means you can't make up your mind. Ugh. I'm sure we've experienced people saying that to us or hearing that about other people. We're not really good at holding several perceptions about an object. We tend to pick a side. It's good, it's bad. I love it, I hate it. I agree with it, I don't agree with it. In crafting our own identities, it makes sense to be able to do this. We're not really good as human beings in managing and maintaining gray areas. Let's keep going. Video game avatars and enclothed cognition. So, enclothed cognition is this idea that our thoughts, our identities, our extensions of ourselves can be clothed and adopted into avatars. So, in an experiment to illustrate this, people were asked to wear a doctor's lab coat or a white painter's smock. They were given tasks. Consumers who wore the doctor's lab coat were better on the attention to detail task relative to those wearing the painter's smock or those in a control group. The lab coat smock was actually the same thing. The only difference was that the participants were told that they were different. And so when we put on something, we put on a suit jacket, we put on a tie, we put on a costume, we adopt certain traits. Priming. We prime ourselves by what we wear. Placing some stimulus or thought into someone primes them to create other associations that come to mind. When we're thinking about what this Spider-Man mask might do for me at Comic-Con, what it might do for me at E3 in Los Angeles, what it might do for me in a cosplay convention. Wearing these garments means that I see myself as the person who would be detail-oriented, especially as a doctor. Proteus effect is also involved here. We act through our avatars, as we believe people may expect us to, based on the avatar appearance itself. We gravitate toward products and services in which we see what represents us. So we build our own identity from engaging in these kinds of behaviors. Let's keep going. Customization and engagement. If customers are able to customize their own engagement, they have higher levels of satisfaction. This has been shown more and more times. There's more excitement. We're also able to remember product placement better. There's more enjoyment, and the experience markedly improves. And so customization and engagement with customers means that they have a say, means that they have an investment, means that they are involved in the product themselves. If we go to the Nike store, if we're able to customize a pair of shoes, it's not just Nike shoes, it's Nike plus you. If we think about gaming, and we think about League of Legends, we think about Fortnite, we think about any of the vast array of games out there that allow for customization. It's not the game itself we create an avatar. It's the game and you. And so now you have a stake in this. You've given some of your reality into the game, creating a tertiary ecosystem by which the video game and you can both coexist. Well, that's all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.